as Martin goes along. So as I said, our presenter today is Oracle ACE Director, Martin D'Souza. Martin D'Souza is the Innovation Director here at IMSUM. He has over 12 years of database-driven and web application development experience. He's an award-winning presenter at international conferences and local user groups. His awards includes most recently Kscope 18 Top Speaker Award in the database track for his presentation logger, Everyone's Using It, Why Aren't You? Martin obtained the title of Oracle ACE Director in February 2012, and Mr. D'Souza is also the primary developer on several popular open source projects, from PLSQL to Apex plugins, as well as the author of a popular Apex blog and multiple Apex books. And now, let's begin. Martin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark. Do you hear okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Before we begin, in case you want to follow along, or some of you might be taking screenshots throughout the entire presentation, I can save you all the trouble of copy this link at the bottom of bit.ly/Kscope 18 Apex APIs, and I'll leave this up for another 30 seconds. What you see here is all there, including every demo I show you. There's a zip file included in these slides. So right now live, you can go to that link. It's mobile friendly. You can follow along, but also refer back to it later on. As well, here's all my contact information. This will be displayed at the end, but in case you want to reach me, you can find me on any one of those mediums. Again, this is, if you do download, all the demo files are here. I'm just bringing this up first because a lot of people ask for it, and I want to get that out of the way. So what is the quickest way to do something? And the quickest way, a lot of people think there's shortcuts and this and that, but the quickest way to do something is actually not to do it at all. And I heard this expression from Tom Kite many years ago in one of his presentations. And when you think of it, a lot of times people try and develop their own tool sets and functionalities, and they just end up spending a lot more time than necessary if someone's already done it for you. And the nice things with Apex is that they have a whole set of APIs that are very diverse. It does a lot of different things for you so that you don't actually have to write them yourself. And I'll tell a quick story. A long time ago, I was working with someone, and after about 3 days of work, they came up and showed me, hey, look, I created this really cool function to handle, I forget what it was, like arrays or whatnot. Then I looked at it and I kind of did a face plant because I told them, well, Apex API already has that. And not only that, there was a bug in their code that they never even saw because it's already been solved by the Oracle team. So the one thing you want to remember from that story is there's probably an API for utility methods out there, and the Apex APIs may have it, may not, but just always think to look first rather than do it. And so today's presentation goal is really to spark interest in the Apex APIs and for you to read the docs. That's a key thing out of all this. Is I'm not going to make you an expert on them. There's a lot of different Apex APIs out there. All I want you to do is remember that it does a lot of cool things, not just Apex specific, and for you to scan through and just see what the possibilities are. All right, so this is how today's presentation is going to go. I won't do an about me. Mark already did that. I'll blow through it a bit. And I'm going to break this up into two main sections, PL SQL APIs and JavaScript APIs. And then I'll wrap up at the end. As Mark said about questions, please type them in live right away when you want them answered. I have asked him to cut me off at any point to answer them. I prefer to do that so that content is relevant, so you can ask questions on what I'm talking about. I realize all of you could be watching the Apple live event right now, but you're here, so I appreciate it, and I want to give you that opportunity. So waiting to the end, unlike the Apple podcast or webinar, you can actually ask live, and I will stop and answer them. So Mark will repeat any questions you guys have. So a bit about me, just one thing on the open source things. I've included some links to popular open source projects that I'm involved on. Logger and OS Utils are probably the biggest ones that you may have heard of or use. If you've never heard of them or tried them, highly recommend to check them out. And with that, the first thing to do is, where do we get the API docs? And if you go into apex.oracle.com, and oh, they've changed this site. Explore features. Sorry, you're gonna have to give me 1 second. Actually, I can show you there's a shortcut. If you go apex.oracle.com/shortcuts, this is the best way you can get them. And then here you have all the documentation links to everything. And then the most recent one is the 18.1 docs. And this will have everything. What you want are the two primary ones are API reference and JavaScript reference. So the API reference one is what we'll spend most of our time in. And this is it. What you probably want to do, if this is your first time actually looking at it, especially if you're non-Apex developer, if you're just a PL SQL developer, still recommend, there's a lot of things, is just expand and just scroll through them quickly and see if any of them actually relate to you. And then you can dig in some more. All you have to do is remember what the possibilities are. You don't have to remember everything about it, just so that you recognize when you see a problem, you're like, oh, I could solve it with the Apex APIs. The other thing is, in this presentation, some of the APIs I show are already available in 5.1 and may be upgraded, and some of them are new to 18.1. And so I've tried to do this with color codings of 5.1 in red and 18.1 in green. For those that are colorblind, 5.1 is in italics and 18.1 are in green. Another thing too is everything I have in this presentation, and that's why I also sent you the link, is linked directly to the docs. So when you see a API or any sort of thing that has content, you can just click on it. This one doesn't have a link associated to it, but everything pretty much does. And you can click and go directly into the docs. So they're very interactive slides. All right, the first thing is with JSON data, I'm going to talk about let me take a step back. All the slides on this is going to essentially go through a problem and then a solution. And so the first problem we're going to talk about is JSON data. So sometimes you get back a lot of JSON data and you need to do something with it. So a lot of times I see people go and work on it in PL SQL. So they'll do row by row and do a lot of parsing themselves, which is very expensive. When in reality, what most people want to do is take a chunk of JSON data that they get from the web or a web service and then query against it and even join to their own tables. So how do you do that really easily? And the answer is you can use something called apex.json.2xml type. And the really nice thing is, if you don't have JSON support, if you're still running in an older database and you don't have native JSON support, this works really well. So I'll show you what this looks like. I'm going to go in, and this is just a small shortcut on a side note, but if in SQL CL, if you go and let's just connect here. If you go and set format JSON, and then you run a query, and I'm just selecting some columns from the employee table, you're going to get JSON, pre-selected JSON data right out there. So you don't have to generate your own test JSON, or if you want to see what a query would look like even in ORDS, this is what you can do. And so I just took that data, and now using apex.json.2xml type, I'm going to pass in that JSON that I just queried, and then using XML table, and this is standard with the Oracle database, and I pass in the path, I'm going to convert all this JSON data that you see here, and I'm going to convert it into a queryable table. So here I've already got it. Click run, and now I can see the employee name and the salary, and then use it like I would with any other SQL statement. So what this might entail is I actually might do it to join it to the employees table and then see what differences of salaries have changed or anything like that. But for Oracle developers, once you have them query, you can do a lot of powerful things with it. If you think this looks complicated at first, sometimes to parse XML types or parse XML data in SQL can get a little confusing, but I've provided, again, an example here that should get you up and running pretty quickly. Next thing is, how do you process a CSV file? This is one of the most common questions I see at clients or when you're talking to people on forums or on Twitter. There is no real great solution. Yet now with Apex, the Apex string, you can actually parse simple CSV files very easily and put it in a queryable, i.e. SQL, not PL SQL format. So I'm going to show you how to do this. But before I do it, I'm actually going to take a step back and look at a slightly different problem, but that's all related because I'm going to build up on the entire solution. So suppose I had this. Suppose I had a concatenated string, and here I just concatenate it with colon, and these are just a bunch of employee numbers. And so you can use the list ag function to generate this pretty quickly. So here I'll just take that list, and then if I want to convert that list and essentially unaggregate it, how do I do it? There's no real built-in function way in Oracle to do it, but with apex string.split, I can take that exact example, all these numbers in one string, and almost pivot or unaggregate, however you want to call it, into columns. And you can see the advantage of this. And on an Apex node, if you get a bunch of IDs from a multi-select list, you can now put it into a table format and then join these actually with the employee table. And I'll show you right here, this is the exact same query. So this is it. And here I'm joining that set of data with the employee table. And there's a lot of powerful things you can do with very low cost, right? All I had to do is call apex string.split. So using that logic of taking a string of data and splitting it and then converting it into rows, I'm going to do this now with CSV data. Except instead of splitting it on the semicolon right at the end, I'm going to split it on the end of line. So each one of these are going to be their own row within the table. So if I run this, and just to let you know, char 10 is the end of line character. Let me just move that here. If I run it, I now have, pretend this is my CSV data, first name, last name, and department, all in their different rows. It still doesn't solve the problem of, well, now that I have them all in their different rows, how do I get them into different columns? With regular expressions, you can do this very easily. If you don't understand regular expressions, this does, and I admit it looks complicated. It's something I highly recommend everyone learn, because once you learn how to read them and write them, you can solve a lot of additional problems you may have struggled with before. So for now, you can just look at this and copy and paste it in your code if necessary, but again, highly recommend to do it. So what I'm going to do is, now I have everything on rows, what I'm going to do is split them into columns using some regular expression. And all of a sudden now I've got my CSV data in a table format in SQL that I could join up with other tables or do a bulk insert, whatever I need to do, without writing a bunch of PL SQL. And before I've had to do this before. We've written lots and lots of PL SQL to parse a CSV. It takes a long time. Had I known this on simple CSVs, it would have saved me a lot of times. So Mark, any questions so far?
So far, none, Martin. Just people were asking if this recording will be available, and I just wanted to mention that it will be available. We'll make it available on our website as soon as possible. But we will be sending links to everyone who's attended to be able to access the recording directly.
Okay, and again, all code you see here, there is a zip file that's accessible to download, and I'll put up the link at the end of the presentation that you can download everything here and run these yourselves. Thank you, Mark. Multi-tenancy is, in case you don't know what it is, you've pretty much seen it before, you may not know about it. It's one code base with multi-tenants, multiple clients. So this is also a very common platform for SaaS-based solutions. And multi-tenancy brings on with it its own little unique problems. And so, but there's different ways to break it down. So one common platform is you have one schema in your database with multiple tenants. And when I say multiple tenants, think about different clients. A very simple
Martin,
example. Yep.
sorry to interrupt. We have a question. The question is how the same logic applies when we have CSV data in external file.
Okay, so if we go back to, I'll continue on multi-tenants in a second. I just copied and pasted this into, and I assumed that I just got this. If you have a CSV from a file in Apex, what you'll need to do is, assuming the person uploads it, you actually get it in a blob format. And then you need to just convert that to a CLOB. And I'll show you how in a second. And then once you have it in a CLOB, you can pass it into this query, assuming, again, simple CSV format. So I'm just going to go off script a bit here, but if you go to github.com or so if you just Google OS utils, and again, that link was included in the open source slide, and you go on documentations, and you click on OS util lob. Again, if you read the APIs, there's a way, and look at examples on how to get a blob from the uploaded file from Apex. But if you want to convert the blob to CLOB, there's a simple function for you. So I recommend you can do your exact problem in about 3 lines of code if you use this instead of having to write it out yourself. But this is probably going to be the hardest part of it, which is already solved.
And we have another question, Martin.
Yep.
It's from Rafael Andrade. He says, hi, in version 5.1, I need to install one API to extract IR on .csv format. In this new version, has by default this export.csv ?
You need to extract
IR on .csv format. And wondering if in this new version, does it have by default this export to CSV? Interactive reports.
Yeah. I'm not sure, Raphael, I'm not sure about your question. So perhaps if you can just send me an email, I'll post up my email after, and I'll try and answer your question if you can provide a bit more details on that. All right, with multi-tenancy, again, multi-tenancy is you have multiple clients using essentially one code base, and there's different ways of doing it. So one way is you have one schema with all your tenants. So for instance, if you use Office 365 on a corporate level, you have multiple clients, i.e. multiple company A, company B, company C, all using the same Office 365 app. Behind the scenes, what probably happens is that all of their database tables have an additional column, usually called tenant ID, could be client ID, doesn't matter, so that when you look at the data, you're just looking at your own business unit, not anyone else's. And again, very common to call it tenant ID. The problem this has from an Apex perspective is when I log into my application, let's say this is my application now, I'm logging into this here on one site and it just looks blue, etc. But what happens if the other client's colors are red or purple or green or yellow? You can't really theme them uniquely to the client. There are workarounds of doing it, but it's really big pain and difficult to do. But thankfully in Apex 5.1, you can use something called set session style, and I'll show you what this means right now. So I've got I've done called oracletest.com, which is not a real URL. If you go to it, I have no clue what it says. But if I go if I go to the website here just on my browser, I just put it in Firefox just to show you it, what is happening. You'll notice that up here it says oracletest.com and it's blue. This is the same application as this application in Chrome. They're all using application 104. But what I would like is that when I'm accessing as oracletest.com, I'd like it to look like Oracle Red for the for clients of like Oracle employees essentially. And so the way to do that is, let me just go, there's something called Theme Roller. If you don't know what this is, Google it. There's a lot of great slides and information about it, but you can have different themes. So if you look at Vita Red, which is just default built in, you'll notice that it has a nice red color, and I can log in here and it will show in Vita Red. So this is what it would look like in Vita Red, right? So just to let you know where I'm getting this from, but I'm going to go back to the default blue and I'll just log out. So what I'd like it to do is that when users come in from oracletest.com, same application, different URL, I want it automatically to turn to their Oracle Red without changing anyone else's theme. So for instance, if I'm coming on this browser, it should still stay blue. And so what you can do is there's a thing called set session URL, set session style, and theme 42 is the universal theme. And the name Vita Red that's what I showed you from the theme builder. So I'm going to set up a page process on page or the login page 9999. And I'll do before header process. And all this is going to do is it says, I'll just pop this open. If the URL contains oracletest.com, I'm going to change to Vita Red. You can do whatever. It could be based on IPs, URLs, client login IDs. It doesn't matter. And so let me just refresh the login page, and nothing happened here. If I log in to my application, it's the same thing. It behaved the same way, even though it says localhost. If I go now on oracletest.com and refresh, why is it? Okay, I'm going to put this in Chrome. So if I go on Oracle Test, you'll notice that all of a sudden it shows up in red. And as I log in here, the entire application will continue to be maintained in red, or those red colors, whereas this application will still stay in blue. And that's really nice to, again, theming for clients, and it could even be department levels, however you break up your multi-tenant applications. So the other thing you may have is, instead of having one schema, so what I showed you is one schema for the entire application broke up by tenant ID. Some people may want one schema per tenant. So you might have tenant A, tenant B, tenant C, which is really customer A, customer B, customer C, and different schemas. And before 18.1, this was pretty difficult to do in terms of you'd have to deploy one application in each one of different workspaces, or one application unique per user. Now you can do something called set parsing schema for request, which allows you to change the parsing schema dynamically on the fly to point saying, we detected this as client A, go look at that schema. Collected this as client B, go look at this schema. And because of what this does behind the scenes, you have to load it in a specific area. So I'm going to show you what exactly I mean by this. Is I've got 2 users in my database. And what I'm going to do is quickly here, I'm going to update everything in the Martin schema. And for the employee name, I'm going to prefix it with M-, just to show it's Martin's employees and not the other ones. Perfect. And what I'll just show you what I mean by this is right now I'm logged in and all the employees look perfectly normal, right? Nothing special. But what I'll do here is saying, if I'm coming in through oracletest.com, I'm going to set the parsing schema to Martin, so using an entirely different data set. If not, use Giphy as the data set. So if I go into shared components, application security, and go all the way down to the database session and this initialization PL SQL code. If you've used an older version of Apex, this used to be called VPD. I'll paste the changes and I'll refresh this page. Looks exactly the same. But now when I go to my home page, you'll notice that it pulls up the employee names M dash, and it's actually all lowercase as well. Back here, it was all uppercase, and on oracletest.com, it's all lowercase. So this is a very powerful feature that you can move and point your Apex application to different schemas, all assuming they have the same table structure and code structure. That's key to this. Any questions on that, Mark?
Okay, can you hear me, Martin? Sorry,
Yeah.
I was off. The next question here is, do I have to have database 18C to use these Apex 18.1 features, or can I still use these features with Apex 18.1 on 12C database?
You can definitely, so excellent question. Just to take a step back, Oracle's changed their numbering format so that all their products are going to use year.quarter as their releases. And Apex 18.1 just really means it was released in 2018 in the first quarter. Same with Oracle 18.1. There is no tight dependency on that, in the sense that you can use Apex 18.1 on an Oracle 12 database. Now, I don't know if you can use it on 11. I don't know if anything was de-supported. It would shock me if you couldn't, but you can definitely mix and match the Oracle version with the Apex version. But it's not something you want to probably continue too long. You want to keep upgrading your database as quick as possible, but definitely they're not tightly correlated every release.
And that's all we have for right now.
Okay. So this is a small but very annoying feature, or annoying thing. It's this next thing I'm going to show you is something small, but it solved a very annoying problem for developers. Is if you've ever used Apex collections, before you had to delete the collection before actually creating a new one. And if you don't know what an Apex collection is, imagine a massive flex field column table that you can just dump a bunch of data in. That's what it is. And before, you needed to constantly saying, if the collection exists, delete it, and then run it. So it's 3 extra lines, but it was something a lot of people forgot and caused a lot of problems. And now they have this new parameter called Truncate if exist, which solves all these problems. So before, this is what the code looked like. You had to write if collection exists, then delete the collection, then create a new collection. Not a major problem, but sometimes in test, you'd only see these in test, or if you reran the page, it triggered something at the wrong time. It was more of a pain. So now you can just write truncate if exist, put yes, and problem solved. Next thing is Apex sessions. This has got to be probably one of the coolest things that are in the Apex 18.1 APIs that will help solve a lot of problems people have. So what usually happens is in Apex, it actually creates a session within the database, within the Apex schema, every time you log in. But sometimes you need to replicate that in a SQL Plus session, but you couldn't before. And so there was no real good way to attach the two. And I'll show you why you actually want to attach the two. And now you have an option for that. So some of the reasons you want to attach like a SQL Plus to an Apex session is you want to debug some of your code. You want to see what the you've got a query that tightly binds to Apex collections or the V function for Apex items, or you want, a lot of problems people have is using Apex mail outside of Apex, essentially in a nightly job or something like that. They usually get an error saying your session doesn't exist. And now you can do it in a supported way. And the solution is to use this new package called Apex Session, and I'll show you some cool features with that. There is some caveats with it. You'll notice in the demo, so please pay attention to this because things may not behave exactly as you think it will. Now, the nice thing is too, is if you're not on Oracle Apex 18.1, you can use OS Utils has this thing called Join Session, very similar, and it does pretty much the same things behind the scenes. So I'm in my SQL Plus session here, and I want to look at all the Apex collections. And you'll notice that there's nothing in here. And so what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to see the Apex collections that are currently in my Apex sessions right in my SQL Plus or in PL SQL Developer. So what I'm going to do is I've got a page here. Let me go back and I'll go Apex collection. And let me just edit this page. So the first thing I want to do is create a collection. And I'm just going to create a collection of all the user objects. So I've got this function, and I'm doing this simply so you can see I'm using the truncated if exist feature. And if I go on here, I'm just pasting that. So here, if I click create generate collection, I've now got all this data. This is pretty much select star from Apex collections. But if I go into SQL Developer and I run it, I still see nothing. And this is a very frustrating point because if you create views on top of Apex collections, there was really no good way to debug it, or you just want to see what does it currently look like. Now I can actually go and attach. So I'm going to take my session ID up here, and I'm going to do Apex session.attach, which is essentially joining the session in SQL Developer and apps 104. Let me just clear this. And then when I query this again, you'll see that I can see everything that is in the Apex collection. Very powerful feature, can help out a lot for debugging purposes. So now when something's going on in the application, when you're dealing with Apex collections, you're not sure, you can use this function. Let me just disconnect, reconnect. I'm just going to attach again. Okay. So the other cool thing is I've got page items. So on this page, I'm just going to type in my name, Martin D'Souza. I'll click save. And if I want to look what these values are in session state, I can see my first name's Martin, last name's D'Souza. And now I want to do the exact same thing in Apex, or sorry, in SQL Developer. And you'll notice that it doesn't actually find them at first. And I think it was because I was already connected. But the reason behind why is, hold on, do I have that? I'm going to get, sorry, let me get back to the reason why. It's going to be easier to explain in a minute. Why isn't this working? Yeah, so what actually happens is, I think I have a bug in this code right now. Unfortunately, I won't go into it, is the first time you query it in a SQL Developer session, when you run the V function, it will actually cache the value that is in memory and store it. And I've already done that. So unfortunately, that's why I'm having a bit of an issue on here. It was null. And so even though the session state shows first name and last name Martin D'Souza, it's not showing up here. So this is something to remember, that the V function goes and pulls it the first time, but after that, it caches it. And so there's no real way workaround right now, unfortunately. It's just something to remember. But the opposite is not true. So I'm going to do something. I'm going to actually put an uppercase. I'm going to set the session state from SQL Developer, and it does get reflected in Apex. So if I rerun this report, sorry, let me just pull up the sessions. Hold on, let me just join the session again. And let me set the session state. If I look at the session values, you can see now it says from SQL Developer. And if I refresh, it showed that. So whatever you set in SQL Developer, it always ports over to the Apex application, but the same is not true on the other side. It all depends on when you query it. To unattach from a SQL session, or sorry, an Apex session, you just call detach. So if I run that and I try querying the collections again, you'll see nothing shows up. And the last thing I want to show you is how to create a net new session. So I've always been caught essentially attaching or joining this session that I've had live going on in an actual Apex session in SQL Developer. But suppose I had this process at night that I had to send a bunch of emails on. Before, if I called apexmail.send, I used to get this error message that said, there's no current Apex session registered, et cetera, and it would fail out. Now you can just create a brand new session. I'm calling create session. And when I actually go apexmail.send, there are no more errors. This is a problem a lot of people have, and now it's solved very, very easily. And if I look at the mail queue, you'll see that I've got this hello world waiting to go out. Any questions on this from Mark, from people?
No questions on this so far, but we did have an observation from your previous segment, and that was we already have create underscore or underscore truncate already available.
Okay, I did not, I wasn't aware of that, so thank you very much.
Sorry, I didn't have a name there.
Okay, that's probably someone from the Apex team. So this is, I'm going to cover two things here in one. One is the APIs, but the other thing is to cover web sources. Now I know Karsten Sarskis has done a lot of great demos on this. So if you've already seen it, it will be a replication or duplicate for you. The first part, if not, really good to know. And it's how to actually execute code, but I'm going to augment it with web sources. So suppose this is the bigger problem. I've got a RESTful service out there that gives me a list of users, and then from PL SQL, I actually want to email all those users. And how do you actually do this? And the solution is using Apex exec, but I'm going to do a couple of extra steps to show you how you can also use all the same functionality in one to both make it work in Apex and in PL SQL. The first thing is I'm going to go, this is a great site. If you want, jasonplaceholder.typecode.com. They've got a lot of great sample JSON data sets. And in this one, this is just a list of users where I've got an ID, username, more importantly, I have an email address, and that's all I really care about, right? So I'm using it just to sample data to say, go get me a list of users. And what I'm going to do is in my, and this is new to 18.1, I'm going to go down to here. There's web source modules. And I'm going to create a new module. And I'm going to call it users. And the endpoint is this JSON data structure. The other reason why this is a great demo site is it uses HTTP. So you don't even need to worry about wallets right away. And I just click next, no authentication just required. And then all of a sudden you'll notice that it detects everything for us. which is very, very nice. I did zero work except copy and paste JSON data structure. So I'm going to create the web source. And then what I'm going to do is in my application, I'm going to create a report, which I've already got with nothing in it. And I'm going to query that web source. So here right now, instead of saying local database on the right, I'm going to go web source. I'm going to choose users and I click save. And all of a sudden I have this nice interactive report based on that JSON data structure. And you'll have to trust me that this is every time I look at this, it's going to fetch from the web service, get it back, parse it, and display it. And I've pretty much only copied the URL, and that's the only work required. So I've now got this thing called web source that I can use in my Apex application, but I also want to use it in PL SQL. I have all these people and I want to email each one. So what you can do is you can use the new Apex exec package, and I'm not going to go through it all. It does a lot of different things. I'm just showing one small functionality. Really cool if you're doing some dynamic PL SQL code that you want to process. And all I'm doing is I'm saying, go get the users module, go find name and email. And in this case, all I'm going to do is DBMS output. I'm not actually going to send these people email, but it could simply be Apex mail, send these people email, or do whatever you want. So I'm going to run this. Oh, I need to do one thing first. Let me clear this. So again, this is the key thing. I'm just getting the column position. And then here, I'm just going to display each column from the web source. And you'll notice down here, it might be a bit small on your screen, but you'll have to trust me that it says name and email address for all those people in the JSON data structure. Very little code I did. Think of this code as more of configuration of what I'm trying to read rather than the actual processing of it. Again, there's a lot of additional functionality in Apex exec for dynamic code. Highly recommend everyone, whether you use Apex or not, to take some time to read it and see what it can do. Mark, any questions on this?
None so far.
Okay, what am I gonna? So I'll do this really quickly. This is new to 18.1. There's a new thing called application settings. So a lot of times people have their own custom table that for each application, there's a bunch of settings they want to do to turn things on, turn things off. These are more than just build options. They're configurable for clients or environments, etc. And now you can go into shared components. And if you look at the settings, there's this new region or area here called application settings. And here it's just really a name value pair thing. So one example I can just show you here is we can create a dev only, yes, no. I'm going to say it's yes, and you can say the value is required. It has to be in a Y or N column, and then on upgrade, whether you keep the value or not. So whether you always reset it or not. Just showing that that's where it is. And then from an API perspective, you can do, I'm just going to connect here. You can actually go and query it. You can query get value and get the value that you want. So here I've got this dev only and the value currently is Y. So you can use this throughout your code in your PL SQL code, however you want. And there's also set value. So if I want to set it as no, and then I run the exact same query again, you'll see that the value says no. So there's a get and set method, very simple, but it saves everyone from creating the same table over and over again.
Martin, we have a question from Rajan. And this question is, my understanding is that no web service is required while using web source by just adding URL there.
No web service. I'm not sure I understand that question. Well, I didn't host, that's a third party, that typecode.com is a third party web service. It's not mine.
Okay.
So if I'm not, I don't understand that question or comment very well, so maybe they can email me after with any questions or feedback.
Otherwise, we have a question from Hansen, and he asks, is there a way to turn modules on and off?
Good question. I'm not sure what your thought is on or off. Let's see if there's build options.
Oh, and he just adds, is this a way to turn modules on and off?
I don't know. I don't know if you mean what you mean by turn them on or off. I don't think you'd actually turn modules personally right now. I don't think you turn them on or off. Think of this as a module is a location for a data source, and it's a RESTful service right now. You don't really turn it on or off. If you want to, it's more of, do you use it or not? Different story of what you're looking to do. So for instance, I don't know if the question is, like, you've got 3 different areas you can get your same data source from. So this users could come like a development server, test server, an INT server.
Oh, he says application settings.
Oh, application settings. You could, again, think of application settings as just anything that you want that requires a name value pair for your application. Or which could be, let's say, the administrator email address. You could, I'm using this dev only as turning whether certain features are on or off, whether a developer or not. You can administrative email, it could be, I don't know, even the title of something, whatever you want. A lot of people have this table that usually is name, value, and a description. This is what that can replace for you. I hope that answers your question, Hansen.
He says thanks.
Okay. So I'm going to show you that this is a cool feature that we can, it's a new thing, and I'm doing it in apex.oracle.com simply because I don't have my email server set up. And in shared components, there's this new thing called email templates. And what you can do is, before, when you created Apex Mail, you had to kind of style things yourself. What we can actually do now is, let me just do this, and Kscope 18 demo. You can actually create an email format here in a much simpler way than writing a bunch of PL SQL. So I'll copy out, and I'm just blowing through this because of time, some HTML here that says hello, and both in plain text and in HTML. And the nice thing is you have as many substitution strings as you want. So it's just pound name, pound, whatever variables you want. So I'm going to save this. And the question is, how do you actually run and trigger this? Well, the nice thing is, if you scroll down after you save it, Apex actually provides you with a sample API usage. And not only that, they detect which placeholders you use, and you can just replace them as necessary. So using that, I'm going to go through and take this code. If I go into the page 1 of the application, just run it. And let me just make sure I've got, so when I click the send button, I will send mail. And all I did was I copied and pasted this set of code from the sample that they sent me and added in a few extra features. So I'm going to rerun this, and I'm going to enter in my email address and my name, Martin D'Souza, live, and some demo. And I'm going to click send. And if I refresh the mail queue, you can see this is what it's trying to send me. And all additional styling and email, whatever is required. All I focus on was the content. And if I actually go into my email now, if things work correctly, we'll see that come through.
Martin, we also have a question. Does email templates support bilingual templates? That's a question from Mohammed.
Okay, I'm going to answer that in a minute.
Sure.
So here's you'll notice that it showed up in the junk folder. Sometimes it shows up in the junk, sometimes it doesn't. So, but you can see this is the live demo that I just did, and very simple to use, very simple functionality. So something you can use personally, if you're going to do this email, if you're going to send a lot of people email, I actually wouldn't do it this way. I'd use a service like MailChimp that specializes this, that's on whitelist, that handle everything, and send them the data rather than doing it here. But very good feature. The other cool thing is sometimes if you can use the same logic, and there's actually this Apex Mail, and it's not just send, but you can actually take this concept and change things to if you had a name value pair string. So let's say you gave the users an option to enter in their dynamic text or set of administrators to enter in dynamic text, they could use the exact same logic you could use the exact same logic to find and replace strings rather than having to write your own. This is something you see in a lot of applications, and everyone has their custom solution, and now you can actually use the Apex API to do it. So it's not, this concept of placeholders and replacing them is not just for mail, it can be for anything you want. And if you look through the Apex Mail function, you're going to see that you can actually leverage that. So the question is it open for translation? I don't know if the email templates are specific to Apex specific translations, but what you could do if it weren't, you can actually go in and create a bunch of, where is it? You could create, let's say, kscope 18-en, kscope 18, whatever you want, and use that, like one for French, one for English, one for Japanese, and then do what you need to there. That would be one option, but again, you'd have to try this with the translator to see if it actually works that way.
And Martin, we have another question is how to loop things in the email template if the email template supports syntax to loop data.
I don't think it supports looping data. What you'd have to do is, let's say you had a list of, how would I say this? Let's say you're a student and you're sending the student all their test results from all their courses. You'd probably have to write something like this, hello, and then put name. And then right here, you'd put a new paragraph of test results. And there, when you attach those that test result string here, you'd probably have to create your own HTML table to do that. So there's, as far as I know right now, it could be off. There's no internal looping mechanism. So it's not like handlebars if you use JavaScript that does it. You'd have to write some loop statement, create your own placeholder value, and then take that and inject it in. And then just you'd have a new line here that says test results, which would be this huge HTML table.
I believe what you just stated answers the next question, which is how to add attachments in this email template. So
how to add attachments. I actually don't know how to add attachments in the email templates. It could be in the APIs. You'd have to read the API documentation. In Apex Mail, there is a way to actually attach templates, or sorry, attach attachments to it. It's definitely in there, but if it's attaching templates to, or sorry, adding attachments to an email template, I'm not 100% sure. You'd have to test that out.
And Martin, just to let you know, we're getting close to the hour.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to wrap this up. The one thing I wanted to show you was Apex messages. This is by far probably a very useful thing that people struggle with. So I'll do one last demo, and the demo speaks for itself. So when you save a page in Apex, you've got all these, page 2. Normally when you click save, there's this box that shows up in the top right corner, but a lot of times people, if they run their own Ajax calls or something, want to control it. And before it wasn't, you had to do a lot of extra work to do it. And now using Apex Message, you can actually do this yourself. So here I'm actually showing that I've got an error or a page level error. Again, you can look at the code, or if I want a success message, I can just do this and it will show a success message. So now you can easily show your own success and failure messages directly in Apex without having to write a bunch of JavaScript or CSS. It's very simple JavaScript. And with that, I will wrap things up at the end. I just want to recap things. I showed a bunch of different APIs, but I only touched the tip of the iceberg. There is a lot of functionality in there. I highly recommend you go try it out yourself, read the documentation, and start playing around with some of the features. And I've included links to both the PL SQL and JavaScript docs. And with that, this is again my contact information. So some of you had some questions that I couldn't answer during the webinar. Feel free to reach out to me. Again, the slides are all available at this URL, and Mark's going to talk about future webinars. I just included it right down here.
Martin, also Kevin mentions, can you share the link to download the source code of the demo?
Yeah, so I'm just going to go quickly home. It's in the second slide of this presentation. There's a link there. So if you copy this link here, go to the second slide, all the content and scripts are there, including the demo applications.
And we have one last question, and it is there any API available for maintaining versions of migration of Apex application in different instances?
I'm not, that's more of a release process question. You can send me, whoever asked that, send me an email. That's a bigger question to answer, but it's usually not as complicated as you think.
Yeah, sorry, don't have a name for that.
Okay, so just reach out to me. I will mark a blog post or two, and that's something I think we'll write about of how we currently do some of our releases and manage version numbers in different instances.
Okay. Oh, and it's Rohit, so he says thanks. All right, well, that concludes our presentation today. And as we mentioned early on, recording of this presentation will be made available. And if you'd like to access it, please email us at webinar@insum.ca and we'll send you the link. So on behalf of everyone here at INSUM, we'd like to thank you for your time, and we certainly hope to see you soon at the next webinar. Thank you very much.